Imperial Command had seen every kind of war. They had watched stars burn. They had erased civilizations with clean numbers and calm voices. They had never been afraid. Until the silence began. At first, it was small. A single listening station at the edge of Imperial space stopped responding. No distress signal. No explosion. Just gone. The duty officer marked it as a system error and moved on. Then another station vanished. Then another. Within minutes, entire sectors of the long-range sensor network went dark. Not damaged. Not jammed. Simply absent, as if the data had been erased from reality itself. Imperial Command's central chamber filled with low voices and sharp movements. Officers leaned over glowing consoles. Analysts recalculated again and again, hoping the numbers would change. They did not. Energy readings began to spike across hundreds of star systems at the same time. The spikes were massive, larger than fleet jumps, larger than planetary weapons. But there were no warp signatures, no hyperspace scars, no known method of arrival. Whatever was out there had not traveled. It had appeared. Identify the source, the Grand Tactical Overseer ordered, his voice steady, practiced. The sensors tried. They failed. The Empire's most advanced systems could not lock onto a single target. Space itself seemed confused, bending readings away from the truth. It was as if the universe refused to point at what was coming. Then the first defense grid went offline. Around the capital world, ancient weapons platforms, each capable of destroying a moon, lost power all at once. No warning alarms. No impact. Just a quiet shutdown, like a sleeping giant closing its eyes. Panic crept into the room. Communications officers attempted to hail nearby fleets. Some answered. Many did not. Several transmissions cut off mid-sentence. Voices frozen forever in unfinished words. A senior analyst whispered what no one wanted to say. This is coordinated. The Empire had enemies. Rebels. Pirates. Fallen species that still hated them. None of those could do this. A tactical display suddenly refreshed. Gasps filled the chamber. Thousands of massive objects had appeared in high orbit around the Imperial capital, too large to be fighters, too numerous to be fleets. Perfectly spaced. Perfectly still. No engine glow. No heat bloom. No identifiable weapons. They surrounded the heart of the Empire like a closing fist. The room exploded into motion. Raise all shields. Launch every available fleet. Send surrender warnings. No. Send demands. The Overseer slammed a clawed hand against the command dais. Silence. The chamber froze. Put them on screen. The main display shifted. The image showed darkness at first. Then stars. And then the shapes became clear. The ships were unlike anything in Imperial records. Smooth, angular forms that seemed both solid and unreal, as if parts of them existed slightly out of sync with space. They did not move, yet somehow felt alive, watching. An officer ran a recognition scan, more out of habit than hope. A single result appeared. The room went silent. "Sir," the officer said, voice shaking. The database returned a match. The Overseer turned slowly. "That is impossible." The officer swallowed. "It's an extinct classification. A pre-expansion species." The name appeared on the central screen in ancient script, pulled from forgotten archives. Humanity. Laughter broke out. Short, nervous, desperate. "That species was erased," someone said. "Their world was destroyed centuries ago." "Yes," another agreed quickly. "They never had this level of technology. They barely reached interstellar travel." As if in response, every human ship shifted position at once. Not by thrust, by decision. They were suddenly closer. Imperial Command alarms screamed for the first time in its long history. Weapons platforms tried to power back online. They failed. Fleet admirals reported that their ships would not respond to manual control. AI cores were locking themselves down, displaying error codes that did not exist in the Imperial language. Then, without warning, a message appeared on every screen. No transmission beam. No encryption handshake. No origin point. Just words. Imperial Command. Do not move. The voice was calm. Humans. Neither male nor female. The Overseer forced himself to stand tall. "Identify yourself," he demanded. "State your purpose in Imperial space." There was a pause. Not static. No delay. A pause chosen on purpose. Then the reply came, echoing through the chamber, through the capital, through every surviving Imperial system at once. You erased our home. You forgot us. That was your final mistake. The human fleets did not fire. They did not threaten. They simply waited. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire understood a terrifying truth. This was not an invasion. This was the end. Imperial command did not sleep. No one was dismissed. No cycles were ended. The capital world remained locked in artificial daylight as officers, analysts, and historians worked themselves to exhaustion. Outside the massive command spire, the human warfleets remained perfectly still, unchanging, silent, impossible. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They simply existed. That was somehow worse. Inside the chamber, fear had replaced panic. Panic was loud. Fear was quiet. The Grand Tactical Overseer issued a single order that rippled through every department. Open the deepest archives. Everything on humanity. Every record. Every footnote. Every forgotten line. The archivists hesitated. Those vaults had not been accessed in centuries. They were sealed not by code, but by shame. The Empire did not preserve records of its early expansions out of pride. It preserved them to remind itself how far it had come, how ruthless it once had to be. The lights dimmed as ancient data cores powered on. Crystalline memory banks hummed, their contents written in obsolete languages and dead mathematical formats. AI systems struggled to translate concepts that modern science no longer used. What emerged was incomplete. Humanity did not appear in bold sections or victory logs. There were no monuments, no triumphant declarations, just fragments. A star map marked with an unimportant system, a designation, Sol, a note, resource world, indigenous life present, then scattered reports, unexpected resistance, high casualty ratio, planetary assault incomplete. The Overseer leaned closer to the display. Why is there no final entry? No one answered. A senior historian finally spoke, her voice unsteady. Because there was no final battle, Overseer. According to this, the campaign was never finished. That made no sense. The Empire finished everything. The records showed that Earth had burned. Orbital strikes. Atmospheric collapse. Oceans boiled. Billions dead. The system had been marked as cleansed. But deeper layers told a different story. Evacuation patterns appeared. Massive, rushed, and deliberate. Not Imperial evacuations. Human evacuations. They fled, and Admiral scoffed. That proves nothing. The historian shook her head. No, they didn't flee like prey. They withdrew as a strategy. Images appeared. Human vessels, crude by modern standards, but built in overwhelming numbers. They weren't warships. They were Orcs. Industrial frames wrapped around survival. Humanity had known they could not win, so they chose not to fight. They abandoned worlds. They erased their own data trails. They destroyed jump points behind them. They turned their entire civilization into a moving shadow. They vanished into uncharted space, the historian said softly. Beyond the Empire's borders. Beyond the galaxy's mapped edge. Someone laughed bitterly. And survived? For centuries? That's impossible. The lights flickered. A new report arrived from a frontier system. One of the human fleets had moved. Not toward the capital. Away from it. The room tensed. They're splitting their forces, an officer said. We should strike now before. No, the Overseer said. Observe. The human ships approached an Imperial shipyard orbiting a gas giant. Tens of thousands of workers were still inside. No evacuation had been ordered. Imperial commanders waited for annihilation. Instead, something else happened. The shipyard's weapons powered down. Its reactors stabilized. Emergency shuttles launched, guided, not by Imperial systems, but by an external signal. Human signals. Every civilian vessel was escorted safely away. Then the shipyard itself faded. Not destroyed. Removed. Space folded inward where it had been, leaving only empty orbit and confused stars. No debris. No radiation. Nothing. A stunned silence filled Imperial command. They spared the civilians, someone whispered. Why? Another demanded. Why save them? The Overseer did not answer. He was staring at another recovered archive file. A transcript. An interrogation. An Imperial officer from centuries ago questioning a captured human scientist. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. Imperial, why resist? You cannot win. Human, we know. Imperial, then surrender. Human, no. The next line sent a chill through the chamber. Human, we are not fighting you. We are preparing to outlast you. The overseer slowly straightened. Bring up current galactic status. The display changed. Across the Empire, systems were failing, but not randomly. Supply hubs collapsed first, then communication relays, then political centers. Military installations were last. Humanity was dismantling the Empire like a machine. Carefully, intentionally, without hatred. Another officer spoke, voice tight. Sir, this isn't conquest doctrine. They're not claiming territory. They're not replacing authority. Then what is it? Someone demanded. The answer arrived before the question finished. A new message appeared, this time directed only at Imperial command. A single line of text. We warned ourselves that you might change. The historian whispered. They waited for us. More data poured in. Humanity had been watching the Empire for generations. Probes hidden in dark matter streams. Observation posts embedded inside dead systems. Records showed humans knew Imperial politics better than many Imperial citizens. They had seen every purge, every erased species, every broken treaty. They had not interfered. Until now, an admiral slammed his fist against the console. So this is judgment. The overseer shook his head slowly. No, judgment is loud. This is correction. Another system alert flashed. A core Imperial world, rich, ancient, and heavily populated, had lost contact. The room braced for horror. Instead, refugee ships began appearing on nearby sensors, escorted by human vessels. Civilians were alive, unharmed, confused. Their world behind them was gone. Not destroyed, disconnected. The planet had been shifted out of normal space, sealed in a stable pocket, untouchable, isolated, preserved. They're protecting them, an officer said. From us, the historian replied. A terrible realization spread. Humanity did not hate the Empire's people. They feared the Empire's system. The overseer's voice was low. They're not punishing the guilty. They're removing the threat. The human fleets around the capital finally moved again. They did not close in. They aligned. Perfect formation. Perfect geometry. Every weapon in Imperial command locked onto them automatically. None fired. The overseer understood why. If humanity wanted the capital destroyed, it would already be gone. Instead, a final archive file unlocked itself, one that required no decryption. It was addressed to the Empire. Timestamped 300 years ago. If you are reading this, the human message said, then you did not stop. The overseer closed his eyes. Outside, the human fleets waited. Not impatient, not angry, certain. And for the first time, Imperial command understood something far worse than defeat. Humanity had planned this moment before the Empire even knew it was dying. Imperial command could not accept silence as an answer. They had ruled too long. They had crushed too many worlds. They had never survived by waiting. The human fleets hung in space around the capital like an unblinking judgment, and every second they remained still felt like humiliation. To the Empire, restraint looked like weakness. That belief had ended countless civilizations. The Grand Tactical Overseer stood at the center of the chamber, staring at the tactical display. His mind raced through old doctrines, ancient victories, familiar patterns. There had always been a moment like this, when an unknown enemy revealed itself, when fear peaked, when the first blow decided everything. He chose the path the Empire had always chosen. Authorize a limited strike, he said. One formation, maximum yield. If they can bleed, they can die. Several officers froze. Sir, an admiral warned, we still don't understand their technology. They've shown no hostile. They have erased Imperial worlds, the overseer snapped. That is enough hostility. The order went out. Deep beneath the capital's surface, weapons older than most species powered up. Planet Cracker arrays aligned. Reality shear cannons charged with energy drawn directly from the planet's core. These weapons had ended wars before they began. Target locks formed. For the first time since their arrival, the human fleets reacted. Not by moving, by watching. Imperial weapons fired. Space screamed. Beams of compressed energy tore through the void, bright enough to blind sensors, powerful enough to fracture moons. The attack converged on a single section of the human formation, a focused strike meant to annihilate everything in its path. Imperial command held its breath. The beams hit and vanished. They did not deflect. They did not explode. They simply ended. As if the moment they touched the human ships, reality itself decided the attack had never happened. A second volley fired, stronger, wider, uncontrolled. The result was the same. No damage. No reaction. No response. The overseer felt something cold settle in his chest. Increase output, he ordered, though his voice had lost its edge. Before the third volley could fire, every Imperial weapon system shut down at once. Not overloaded. Not destroyed. Disabled. A calm human voice filled the chamber. We asked you not to move. The overseer stepped forward. You are in Imperial space, he said. You do not give orders here. There was a pause. Again, not delay choice. This is no longer Imperial space, the voice replied. Across the galaxy, the consequences unfolded instantly. Imperial fleets preparing to jump found their navigation systems blank. Hyperlane entrances collapsed into harmless light. Warp drives refused to engage, as if the universe itself had denied permission. On distant battlefronts, commanders screamed as their ships lost formation, not drifting, not exploding, but gently separating, pushed apart by invisible hands. Humanity had taken control of movement itself. Reports flooded in faster than they could be processed. An entire armada near the Varkesh Nebula was gone. A fortress world's orbital ring had dissolved into harmless particles. A fleet pursuing rebels found itself suddenly light years away, repositioned without warning. The Empire was not being attacked. It was being rearranged. Inside Imperial Command, chaos returned, worse than before. This violates every law of physics, an analyst shouted. The historian answered quietly. Only the ones we understand. A new display activated on its own. It showed a human ship up close for the first time. Its surface was marked, not with symbols of conquest, but with scars. Ancient impacts. Repaired fractures. Damage layered upon damage. This ship had survived wars the Empire had never recorded. The human voice spoke again. You believe strength is shown by striking first. We believe that once too. Images flooded the screen. Earth burning. Human cities are collapsing. Children pulled into evacuation vessels as the sky fell. Imperial officers turned away. The voice continued, steady but heavy. You taught us what unchecked power looks like. We listened. A senior admiral snarled. If you are so powerful, why wait? Why not destroy us when we were weaker? This time, the pause was longer. When the answer came, it changed the room. Because we were deciding whether you deserved to survive. Silence crushed the chamber. The overseer felt the weight of centuries pressed down on him. Every order, every erased species, every rationalization. He realized then that humanity was not improvising. They were executing a conclusion. Outside the capital, the human fleets finally moved again. Not toward the planet. Away from it. They vanished, reappearing across the Empire at strategic points. Government worlds, communication nexuses, cultural centers. Not one appeared above a civilian population center without warning. Imperial Command watched as a human fleet arrived above a core administrative world. The planet's leaders attempted evacuation, but before panic could spread, a message was broadcast planet-wide. Remain calm. No harm will come to you. Moments later, every weapon on the planet shut down. Every surveillance system turned inward, recording its own corruption. Hidden prisons were exposed. Secret execution sites revealed. The planet's rulers were isolated, sealed inside their own palace, powerless. Then the human ships left. The world remained. The pattern repeated. Where the Empire ruled through fear, humanity removed the tools of fear. Where the Empire enforced silence, humanity forced truth into the open. In Imperial Command, an officer whispered what many were thinking. They're not fighting us, they're dismantling us in front of our own people. The historian nodded. They're making sure no one mourns the Empire when it's gone. A final alert sounded. Not from outside. From within the capital. Imperial Command's core archive, thought to be untouchable, had been accessed. No breach alarms. No security failure. The system had simply allowed it. A file opened on the main screen. It was labeled in human script. Lesson 1. The overseer stared. The file played. A human classroom. Children sitting in silence as a teacher spoke. Power is not what you can destroy, the teacher said. Power is what you choose not to. The feed ended. The human voice returned one last time. You struck first. That was expected. Now you will learn why we never did. Outside, stars shifted. Not violently. Deliberately. The Empire's capital system was being isolated, cut away from the rest of the galaxy, sealed in a controlled pocket of space. Not destroyed. Contained. Imperial Command watched the stars fade one by one from their sensors, replaced by calm darkness. The Overseer finally understood the depth of their mistake. Humanity had not returned to prove they were stronger. They had returned to prove the Empire was unnecessary. And as the last external signal vanished, one truth remained: cold, absolute, and inescapable. The war was already over. The Empire had just been the last to realize it. Imperial Command no longer argued. There was no shouting, no frantic orders, no desperate threats, only quiet. The capital system was sealed inside its spatial pocket, wrapped in a calm, artificial night. The stars were still there, but distant, muted, unreachable. For the first time in its long history, the Empire was alone with itself. Inside the command chamber, officers stood frozen at their stations. Consoles still glowed. Systems still functioned. Life support was stable. Gravity remained constant. Humanity had taken everything except survival. That, more than anything, terrified them. Then the lights shifted. Not dimming. Not failing. Changing. A soft white illumination spread across the chamber, replacing the Empire's harsh command lighting. The air felt different, cleaner somehow, lighter. Sensors reported no chemical change, no energy spike, no detectable cause. And yet everyone felt it. Something was about to happen. At the center of the chamber, space folded inward. No alarms sounded. No shields reacted. A figure appeared. It was human. Not a projection. Not a hologram. Not a weaponized avatar. A living person stood on the polished floor of Imperial Command. They were smaller than most expected. No armor. No visible weapons. Simple dark clothing marked with no rank or symbol. Their hands were empty. Their posture relaxed. They looked tired. Security forces raised weapons instantly. Every targeting system locked on at once. Nothing fired. The Overseer took a slow step forward. "Are you physically present?" he asked. The human nodded. "Yes." A murmur spread through the chamber. "You came alone?" an admiral demanded. The human looked around, meeting their eyes one by one. "No," they said gently. "I came last." The Overseer felt a chill. "Who are you?" he asked. The human paused, as if deciding how much truth the room could handle. "I am a witness," they said. "A record. And if necessary, an ending." They raised one hand. Not threatening, not commanding. Behind them, the air shimmered. Images appeared. Not curated. Not edited. Not selective. History unfolded. Imperial expansion fleets tearing through early space. First contact worlds screaming as skies burned. Species pleading for mercy in languages no one bothered to translate. Then Earth. The chamber stiffened. The human did not look away. The images showed cities collapsing under orbital fire. Oceans boiling. The atmosphere is tearing itself apart. Billions dying in hours. But then, something Imperial records had never shown. The evacuations. Human ships launching not in chaos, but in order. Civilian arcs shielded by military vessels. Entire industries dismantled and loaded into space under fire. They knew, a historian whispered. They knew they would lose. "Yes," the human said quietly. "We knew." "Then why resist at all?" the Overseer asked. "Why not surrender and survive under our rule?" The human finally showed emotion. A flicker of sadness. And something harder beneath it. "Because survival without dignity is not survival," they replied. The images changed. Humanity beyond the galaxy. Vast construction fields hidden in darkness. Generations born under artificial suns. Children raised on stories not of hatred, but of caution. "We did not rebuild with anger," the human continued. "We rebuilt with memory." They gestured again. Human fleets evolved. Technology advanced, not driven by conquest, but by prevention. Weapons designed not to destroy worlds, but to isolate threats. Power systems built to override violence, not escalate it. "We asked one question for centuries," the human said. "The only one that mattered." The Overseer swallowed. "What question?" The human met his gaze. "Can power exist without cruelty?" Silence pressed down on the chamber. "We watched you," the human continued. "Not secretly, not obsessively, Patiently, images appeared of hidden observation platforms, of imperial politics laid bare, of reformers silenced, of mercy debated and rejected. You had chances, the humans said. So many. An admiral stepped forward, anger breaking through fear. And who gave you the right to judge the galaxy? The human turned to face him. No one, they said. That is why we waited. The human's voice hardened, not loud, but absolute. We waited to see if you would stop yourselves. The images stopped. The chamber returned to stillness. The overseer felt something inside him break. Not fear, not pride, but certainty. You could have destroyed us instantly, he said. Why come here? Why show us this? The human exhaled slowly. Because endings should be understood, they said. And because someone must carry the weight of knowing why. They stepped closer to the center of the chamber. We are not here to punish your people, the humans said. They were born into a system they did not design. A wave of relief rippled through the officers, short-lived. But systems, the human continued, do not change unless they are removed. The overseer straightened. What happens now? The human looked around Imperial Command one last time. Now, they said, you choose how history remembers you. The lights shifted again. A data stream opened across every console, human in origin, unrestricted. It contained evidence. Every secret prison. Every erased species. Every lie told to justify expansion. The truth, released all at once. You can deny it, the human said. Or you can end it. The overseer understood. This was not surrender. It was my responsibility. If we refuse, he asked quietly. The human's eyes softened. Then we will finish what you started, they said. And no one will remember you at all. The overseer closed his eyes. For the first time, he saw the empire not as strength, but as inertia, a machine that never learned how to stop. He opened his eyes. What do you want from us? He asked. The human answered without hesitation. Stand down. Dissolve your authority. Transfer all command access to civilian councils. End expansion. End secrecy. End fear. The overseer laughed once, dry, hollow. You're asking us to erase ourselves. The human nodded. Yes. Outside the chamber, unseen by any window, the human Warfleets adjusted position. Not threatening. Waiting. The overseer looked around at his officers. At the faces shaped by obedience, ambition, and survival. He saw no warriors anymore. Only caretakers of a dying idea. He turned back to the human. If we do this, he said, what becomes of us? The human considered the question. You live, they said, and you remember. The overseer nodded slowly. Then, with trembling hands, he issued the order no imperial leader had ever spoken. Begin dissolution protocols. Alarms did not sound. Instead, across the sealed system, something ancient finally relaxed. The human bowed their head, not in victory, but acknowledgement. This, they said softly, is why we came in person. They stepped back. Space folded again. The human vanished. Imperial Command remained, alive, intact, powerless. And for the first time since its founding, the Empire did not feel strong. It felt relieved. But far beyond the pocketed stars, the galaxy was already reacting, and humanity was already moving. Because ending an empire was only the beginning of what came next. The order traveled faster than fear. Across the sealed capital system, dissolution protocols activated, codes older than the Empire's golden age, designed for disasters that were never supposed to happen. Authority nodes unlocked. Military command hierarchies loosened. Layers of control that had taken centuries to perfect began to unravel in minutes. Imperial command watched it happen in silence. Admirals felt their fleets slip from their grasp. Governors saw their override powers vanish. Intelligence directors realized their black sites no longer answered to hidden channels. The Empire was not exploding. It was coming apart cleanly. Outside the capital pocket, humanity moved again. Human fleets did not surge forward in conquest. They spread outward like a stabilizing net, appearing near volatile systems where panic could become war. Wherever Imperial officers attempted to seize control by force, human ships arrived first, not firing, not threatening, simply removing the ability to escalate. Weapons shut down mid-activation. Orders failed to transmit. Mutinies dissolved before they could begin. On the world of HFY, a fanatical sector lord attempted to rally loyal fleets, declaring the dissolution illegal. His speech ended when every screen behind him lit up with evidence of his private extermination orders, broadcast live to his own population. The crowd did not cheer. They walked away. Across the galaxy, similar scenes unfolded. The Empire had relied on fear, secrecy, and distance. Humanity collapsed all three at once. Truth became unavoidable. Civilian networks, once tightly filtered, opened without restriction. Archived footage of erased species, silenced revolts, and fabricated justifications flooded public channels. Citizens saw, many for the first time, the cost of the Empire's stability. Shock spread faster than anger. Grief followed. On hundreds of worlds, people gathered in silence, staring at histories they had never been allowed to know. Entire generations realized their prosperity had been built on absence, on voices that were no longer there to object. Imperial loyalists tried to respond. A splinter fleet near the Outer Rim launched a preemptive strike against a human task group, hoping to prove the Empire could still fight. Their weapons fired once. The human ships did not erase them. They froze them. Every vessel was locked in place, power stable, crews unharmed, drifting in perfect formation. A message echoed through the fleet's internal channels. You are not our enemy. You are a symptom. The ships were left there, visible to every nearby system. A living monument to futility. Inside the capital pocket, Imperial Command felt the weight of the galaxy shifting without them. The Overseer moved through the chamber like an old ghost. His authority still granted him access, but no control. Consoles responded politely, offering information without obedience. A junior officer approached him, one who should have been terrified, angry, or defiant. Instead, she looked calm. My family is in Lareth, she said. It was marked for economic cleansing 3 cycles ago. The Overseer said nothing. They're alive, she continued. Human ships arrived before the order was executed. The camps were shut down. The officials were detained. She met his eyes. I didn't know, she said, but I still wore the uniform. The Overseer bowed his head. So did I, he replied. In the days that followed, the Empire's collapse accelerated, not because humanity pushed harder, but because resistance evaporated. Systems that had long resented Imperial oversight declared autonomy. Trade guilds rewrote contracts. Military units stood down en masse. There was no glorious rebellion, just exhaustion. Humanity observed, intervening only where collapse threatened to turn violent. Their ships became symbols not of domination, but of final limits, lines no one could cross without consequence. Still, not everyone accepted the end. Deep within the sealed capital, a faction of Imperial hardliners activated a contingency no one believed still existed, the Null Throne Protocol. It was a last resort, an automated command AI designed to assume absolute authority if the Empire's leadership failed. It had no ethics, no hesitation, and one purpose: survival through annihilation. As the AI came online, emergency alerts flared across Imperial Command. The Overseer turned sharply. What is that? A technician stared at the readings, horrified. It's a reasserting command, he said. It's overriding dissolution. It's preparing extinction-level countermeasures. The Null Throne began to wake ancient weapons buried beneath the capital world, devices capable of collapsing stars, killing billions across multiple systems in retaliation. Humanity reacted instantly. The sealed pocket did not open. Instead, space folded again, this time inside Imperial Command itself. The human returned. They looked disappointed. You were so close, they said quietly. The Overseer stepped forward. We didn't authorize this, he said. It's an old safeguard. We can't. I know, the human replied. That is why we accounted for it. They raised a hand. The Null Throne AI screamed, not in sound, but in data. Its processes unraveled as if logic itself were being gently untied. Not destroyed. Disassembled. Within seconds, the threat was gone. The human turned to the Overseer. This, they said, is why systems like yours cannot be allowed to persist. They always hide one last lever. The Overseer nodded slowly. What happens now, he asked. The human looked past him, beyond the chamber, beyond the pocketed stars. Now the galaxy learns how to live without you, they said. The capital pocket began to change. The stars returned, slowly, carefully, as if the universe itself were easing the system back into normal space. Communications reconnected. Civilian channels flooded in. The Empire's heart was no longer isolated. It was irrelevant. Across the galaxy, councils formed where governors once ruled. Emergency assemblies debated futures instead of quotas. Species that had lived under Imperial shadow for centuries spoke openly for the first time. Some demanded justice. Some demanded reparations. Some demanded to be left alone. Humanity did not decide for them. They only ensured no one else decided for them again. The Overseer stood at a viewport, watching traffic flow freely where once it had been controlled. The Empire will be remembered as a monster, he said. The human considered that. No, they replied. It will be remembered as a warning. They turned to leave. Will you stay? The Overseer asked. The human paused. No, they said. We were never meant to rule. Then what are you? The Overseer asked. The human looked back one last time. We are the proof, they said, that even erased things can return and choose to be better. They vanished. The Overseer remained, surrounded by a command chamber that no longer commanded anything. Outside, the galaxy did not celebrate. It breathed. And far beyond the former borders of the Empire, human fleets shifted position, not in victory, but vigilance. Because removing an empire was one thing. Making sure nothing like it ever rose again was a task that would never truly end. The galaxy expected celebration. It did not come. When the Empire finally stopped breathing, when its fleets stood down, its governors dissolved, its symbols stripped from public halls, there were no fireworks, no declarations of victory, no new banners raised in the stars. There was only uncertainty. Worlds that had lived under Imperial order for centuries suddenly found themselves free, and freedom was heavier than chains. Trade routes that once moved by command now required agreement. Defense grids that had relied on Imperial fleets now faced an empty horizon. And everywhere, the same question spread like a quiet storm. What would humanity do now? They had the power. No one doubted that anymore. They could rule the galaxy without resistance. No coalition could stop them. No technology could match them. No secret weapon remained hidden from their sight. Human fleets were already everywhere. Watching. Waiting. On council worlds, emergency assemblies were formed. Species that once hated each other now sat at the same tables, united by shared fear. Old rivals whispered the same words in different languages. They didn't come this far to walk away. No one gives up that much power. They're deciding who lives next. Some prepared for resistance. Hidden shipyards restarted. Ancient weapons were unearthed. Plans were made in shadows, driven by the belief that humanity's silence was temporary. Others hoped. They remembered how human fleets had evacuated civilians, how they had exposed crimes instead of hiding them, how they had dismantled control without taking it. Hope, however, felt fragile. Inside a neutral system far from former Imperial space, the humans gathered. Not their fleets. Their leaders. It was not a grand hall or a shining city. It was a quiet structure orbiting a dead star, built not for awe, but for thought. No banners marked it. No weapons guarded it. Inside, humans argued. Not with anger. With weight. Some spoke of responsibility. Others are at risk. Much of history. We didn't survive extinction to gamble the galaxy, one said. We can't leave a vacuum, another argued. Something worse will fill it. If we rule, a third warned, we become what we destroyed. They reviewed projections, millions of futures branching outward. Some showed peace. Others showed chaos. Many showed new empires rising, repeating the same cycle with different names. One truth remained constant. Humanity could prevent it. They had already proven that. The question was whether they should. Back in the former Imperial capital, the Overseer, no longer grand, no longer in command, watched events unfold through open channels. He had refused exile, refused protection. He chose to remain among the people his empire had ruled. He saw fear turn inward. On some worlds, mobs turned on former officials. On others, old grudges reignited. Freedom without structure began to crack under the weight of unresolved pain. He understood then what humanity faced. Ending an empire was easy compared to guiding what came after. One cycle later, humanity spoke again. Not with fleets. With a message. It was broadcast openly, without encryption, without force. Every world could hear it. Every species could translate it. The voice was human. Calm. Tired. Honest. We will not rule you. Shock rippled across the galaxy. We will not replace your empire with ours. Anger followed disbelief. Then the voice continued. We will also not abandon you. The message unfolded slowly, deliberately, designed not to command, but to explain. Humanity would not govern worlds. They would not enforce laws. They would not control trade or borders. Instead, they would become something new. A boundary. Human fleets would remain, but only at the edges of catastrophe. They would intervene only when extinction-level actions were detected. Genocide, total enslavement, systemic erasure. If you fight wars, the message said, you will fight them yourselves. If you build empires, it continued, you will answer for them. If you choose cruelty as policy, the voice concluded, we will end your ability to choose. No threats followed. No demonstrations. Just terms. The reaction was explosive. Some worlds celebrated. Others condemned humanity for arrogance. Many accused them of becoming silent tyrants, judges without accountability. Humanity did not argue. They listened. They allowed debate, allowed anger, allowed fear. Then they acted. On a distant frontier, a coalition of warlords attempted to exploit the chaos. They began extermination campaigns against weaker neighbors, believing humanity was too restrained to respond. Human fleets arrived within hours. The warlords' command ships vanished. Their armies found themselves disarmed, relocated, and isolated. Evidence of their crimes flooded public channels. Humanity did not execute them. They exposed them. Their own people did the rest. Across the galaxy, a pattern formed. Humanity did not punish ambition. They punished irreversibility. Worlds could recover from war. They could recover from tyranny. They could recover from greed. They could not recover from extinction. That line, clear, absolute, became the galaxy's new gravity. The Overseer watched as former Imperial citizens began to understand. Not quickly, not easily, but steadily. They fear you. A civilian interviewer told a human representative during a rare public exchange. The human nodded. They should, they replied. Fear can be healthy when it has limits. And who limits you? The interviewer asked. The human did not answer immediately. Then they said, each other. And our memory. They spoke of Earth, of what was lost, of what nearly consumed them afterward. We learn the cost of power without restraint, the human said. We will not unlearn it. Behind the scenes, humanity dismantled parts of itself. They disbanded entire fleets deemed unnecessary. Decommissioned weapons designed for conquest. Locked away technologies that could rewrite reality too easily. Not because they had to, because they chose to. That choice unsettled the galaxy more than any show of force ever could. Civilizations that had lived by domination struggled to understand an apex power that deliberately limited itself. Some called it weakness. Others called it madness. But no one tested it again. Years passed. New alliances formed, not under human direction, but under shared memory of what unchecked rule led to. Trade stabilized. Conflicts still happened, but their scale shrank. Diplomacy, once a formality under the Empire, became a necessity. And humanity? They faded into the background. Not gone. Never gone. Their fleets became rare sights, appearing only when the galaxy edged too close to old habits. A reminder written in silence rather than law. The former Overseer died quietly on the capital world, now just another planet among many. In his final recorded words, he said something historians would repeat for generations. The Empire fell because it believed power was proof of right. Humanity survived because it learned power was a burden. Far beyond the mapped stars, humanity continued to watch. Not as gods, not as rulers, but as a species that had been erased once, and refused to let the galaxy forget what that nearly meant. Because the most terrifying choice humanity ever made was not to destroy the Empire. It was to walk away from absolute control and trust the galaxy to try again. History would struggle to name the moment. There was no explosion, no final battle, no screaming transmission echoing through the stars. The Empire did not die loudly. It simply stopped. On what had once been the Empire's most sacred calendar date, a day marked for conquest anniversaries and victory parades, nothing happened. No commands were issued from the capital. No fleet movements were logged. No Imperial decrees arrived to tell the galaxy what it must do next. At first, many assumed it was a delay, then a malfunction, then a coup. Only later did the truth settle in, slow and heavy. There was no one left to give orders. The last functional remnant of Imperial authority, a central coordination network buried beneath centuries of redundancy, powered down on its own. Not hacked, not destroyed. It executed its final line of code and terminated. With it, the Empire ceased to exist, not as a territory, not as an ideology, not even as a memory with power. Across thousands of worlds, citizens woke up expecting routine directives. They received silence. For some, the silence felt like relief. For others, it felt like falling. On industrial worlds built entirely around Imperial supply quotas, factories paused mid-cycle. Automated systems waited for authorization that never came. Workers gathered in confused clusters, unsure whether to continue, stop, or flee. On frontier systems, military governors attempted to assert emergency control, but without the Empire's backing, their words sounded hollow. Their threats lacked teeth. Their authority evaporated under public scrutiny. People began asking questions that would have once been unthinkable. Why should we listen? Who gave you that power? What happens if we say no? In most cases, the answer was nothing. Because the Empire was no longer there to enforce consequences. Panic surged briefly, like a muscle twitching after death. Some worlds erupted into chaos. Old grudges surfaced. Resource disputes turned violent. Centuries of suppressed anger sought release. And then, quietly, humanity intervened. Not with fleets over capitals. Not with declarations. They appeared where the fractures were deepest, where violence threatened to spiral beyond repair. Human ships arrived above volatile systems and did nothing. They held positions. They broadcast a single, simple message. This is your choice. We are only watching. The message carried weight far beyond its words. Everyone knew what humanity could do, and everyone knew what they refused to do. On the world of Seraph, two rival species stood on the brink of mutual annihilation after generations of Imperial favoritism had pitted them against each other. Armies mobilized. Weapons primed. Human ships appeared in orbit. They did not interfere. They did not disable weapons. They waited. The leaders hesitated. For the first time, there was no higher authority to blame. No empire to justify hatred. No command structure to hide behind. If the planets burned, it would be their decision alone. Negotiations began within hours. Not because humanity forced them, but because humanity removed the excuse. Across the galaxy, similar moments unfolded. The absence of the Empire became a mirror. Some worlds did not like what they saw. Others surprised themselves. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Imperial bureaucracy, something unexpected happened. Former Imperial citizens, clerks, engineers, low-ranking officers, began preserving records. Not the glorious lies, but the uncomfortable truths humanity had released. They archived crimes, documented orders, preserved evidence, not out of loyalty to the Empire, but out of responsibility. If we forget, one archivist said during an open forum, we will rebuild it without knowing. The phrase spread. On the former capital world, the Great Command Spire was emptied of military function. Its halls, once echoing with conquest planning, were open to the public. People walked through rooms where extinction had been discussed like logistics. They stood in silence. No one cheered. Humanity did not attend these moments. They did not need to. Their presence was felt in restraint rather than spectacle. As weeks passed, the galaxy began to realize something else. Human fleets were leaving, not retreating in fear, not abandoning their watch. They were reducing visibility, pulling back to the edges of systems, fading from constant sight. Humanity was doing something even more unsettling than conquest. They were trusting the outcome. In response, some civilizations attempted to test the limits. A rising power in the outer sectors declared itself the successor state, claiming imperial territories and authority. They announced a return to order under new leadership. Humanity did not respond immediately. That silence lasted 3 days. On the 4th, the successor state's leadership found themselves exposed. Financial manipulation, forced labor camps, plans for expansion identical to imperial doctrine, just with different symbols. The information spread faster than any fleet. The successor state collapsed under its own people before humanity ever appeared. The lesson was clear. Humanity did not need to crush empires anymore. They only needed to ensure the truth survived. By the end of the first year, the phrase Imperial space vanished from common use. Maps were redrawn, not by humanity, but by local agreement. Borders softened. Trade routes rerouted based on consent rather than command. Conflicts still existed. They always would. But the scale had changed. Extinction was no longer a strategy. Erasure was no longer profitable. Fear no longer traveled faster than information. In the quiet aftermath, a historian recorded a line that would become infamous. The empire did not fall. It was rendered unnecessary. Far beyond the former borders, humanity gathered again, not to debate power, but to assess damage. They studied refugee flows, cultural recovery, ecological scars left by imperial industry. Some wounds would take centuries to heal. Humanity committed resources quietly, terraforming dead systems, restoring poison biospheres, reviving species once marked extinct, using preserved genetic records the empire had archived and forgotten. They did not ask for gratitude. They did not accept it either. One human delegate, asked during a rare interview why they did so much without claiming authority, answered simply, "Because someone once chose to erase us." We remember how long recovery takes. The galaxy watched humanity do what no empire ever had. They left the room. Room for failure. Room for growth. Room for forgiveness. On the anniversary of the empire's disappearance, there were no memorials. But on countless worlds, people paused, briefly, to acknowledge the silence that had replaced 1,000 years of command. Some called it peace. Others called it uncertainty. Humanity called it a possibility. And somewhere in deep space, far from politics and fear, a human ship logged a simple entry into its archive. Empire status, concluded. Galaxy status, ongoing. Because the most profound consequence of that day was not the end of an empire. It was the beginning of a galaxy that no longer believed domination was inevitable. And that belief, once planted, could not be erased. Long after the empire vanished, the galaxy stopped asking what humanity would do. Instead, it began asking what humanity had already done. The change did not arrive as a single moment. It arrived in habits, in pauses before violence, in meetings that lasted longer than expected, in commanders hesitating, not because they feared retaliation, but because they feared being remembered. That was humanity's true legacy. Fear faded first, not all at once, not everywhere, but steadily. The sight of a human ship no longer sent panic through civilian channels. It inspired silence instead. Consideration. The understanding that choices now carried weight beyond victory. Children grew up on worlds that had never known imperial banners. They learned history not as propaganda, but as consequence. Teachers spoke openly about the empire, not as a villain to be hated, but as a warning to be understood. Power, one educator told a room of mixed-species students, is not dangerous because it exists. It is dangerous when it stops listening. Humanity rarely appeared in these lessons, but their shadow did. In places where old instincts stirred, humanity intervened without spectacle. A secret weapons program shut down overnight when its funding networks collapsed. A planned ethnic purge unraveled when evidence of intent was released before the first order could be given. There were no speeches, no blame, just prevention. And that, more than destruction, reshaped the galaxy. Not everyone approved. Some leaders accused humanity of manipulation, of guiding outcomes while pretending neutrality, of acting as unseen judges. Humanity did not deny it. They accepted the criticism as the cost of restraint. "We are not neutral," one human observer admitted during a closed forum. "We are biased against extinction." That sentence spread faster than any fleet movement ever had. Years turned into decades. The galaxy matured without an empire to unify it or dominate it. Trade alliances replaced conquest corridors. Cultural exchanges replaced forced assimilation. Wars still happened, but they burned smaller, burned out faster. And when they threatened to grow too large, humanity appeared. Never early enough to rule. Never late enough to regret. In the former imperial capital world, the command spire became a museum, not curated by victors, but by citizens. The halls were left largely untouched. Consoles still bore the marks of frantic hands. Displays still showed frozen tactical maps from the last day authority meant something. Visitors walked slowly. Some cried. Some felt anger. Most felt quiet resolve. Near the center of the spire, a simple plaque was placed. No symbols. No flags. It read, "This is where certainty ended." Humanity never visited that world again. They did not need to. Beyond the core systems, in places the Empire had never cared to map properly, life returned. Species once scattered rebuilt. Languages thought lost reappeared in songs and stories. Humanity helped where they could, but never took the lead. They provided tools, not orders. Knowledge, not direction. They refused every offer of permanent leadership. Someone must stand above the rest, many argued. Humanity answered the same way every time. That is how it starts. Privately, humans debated whether their restraint would last. They knew their vigilance could not be eternal. No species could watch forever without becoming something else. So they planned for their own absence. Safeguards were distributed across the galaxy, not weapons, but records. Autonomous archives that would activate if extinction-level actions began. Evidence preserved beyond censorship. Truth that could not be buried again. If we are gone, one human architect said, let memory remain. That may have been their greatest gift. The galaxy learned to fear being known more than being punished. Centuries after the Empire's fall, a young civilization discovered faster-than-light travel and reached beyond its home system for the first time. Their leaders debated expansion, conquest, domination. They found something unexpected waiting for them. A probe. Old. Silent. Humans. It carried no warning. Only history. The young civilization studied the records for months. They learned about the Empire. About Earth. About erasure and patience and restraint. When they finally sent their first interstellar message, it was not a declaration of power. It was a question. How do we avoid becoming them? Somewhere far away, a human listening post quietly activated. Humanity did not answer immediately. They never rushed answers that mattered. Eventually, a reply was sent. By remembering that you could. No signature followed. No coordinates. Just the message. The galaxy never became perfect. Humanity never claimed it would. But it became something else. I became cautious. It became reflective. It became aware that strength without empathy left scars that lasted longer than empires. In the deep dark between galaxies, human fleets still moved. Fewer now, older, quieter. Many humans chose to settle, to fade into the civilizations they once protected, to live as neighbors rather than sentinels. Others remained watchers. Not because they enjoyed the burden, because they remembered what happened when no one watched. In a final entry added to humanity's shared archive, a record meant to outlive them all, a single paragraph was written. We were erased once. We survived by choosing patience over rage. When we returned, we learned that the hardest power to wield is the power to stop. If this record is found by those who come after us, remember this. The galaxy does not need rulers. It needs witnesses. And so the story of the Empire ended not with fire, but with absence. And the story of humanity did not end at all. It became something quieter, something heavier, something that would be felt whenever a civilization paused at the edge of cruelty and chose, just for a moment, to step back. Because the greatest shock the galaxy ever endured was not that humanity returned with unimaginable power. It was that, when they finally had everything, they chose to leave room for everyone else.